What is up, everybody? We are back again with another sell or keep. Today, we are going to be focusing on West Ham United, who, for me, honestly, in this moment in time, I'm going to be planning this like they are getting relegated. What does West Ham United do with relegation? What do they do with their squad when they are in the championship? So, this is what I think not only they should do, but what I think they'll be forced to do because they are in the championship. So firstly, we're going to be starting with goalkeepers. Mads Hermansen, I think, is going to be a stay, and I think he is going to be the starter for West Ham United in the championship. I think this is kind of his level as the championship. He played for Leicester. He kind of made a move to West Ham, hasn't really gone to play. I think this is his level. I think at the championship, this is the type of goalie you want. He's on a relatively low wage, I think about €40,000 per week. And I think youthful, this can be someone that helps you get up and back into the Premier League instantly. Moving on next is Fabianski. Although this is a contract end, I think it's also just going to be possibly a retirement. I think he's around 41 years old. His contract's ending. There's going to be really no need for him. If you want, they could add one more year to his contract and just have him as a backup for Hermansen in the championship, and I think you can get him on a relatively even lower wage. I don't think he's making an insane amount right now, but you can probably get him for €30,000 per week. So I think it's either a contract. I think it's going to be a contract, and I think he's going to retire. Moving on next to Alfonso Areola, I think he's just an obvious sell. 2 years left on his contract, one of the highest earners at West Ham, and he's just honestly been pretty bad at West Ham his entire time here. Most fans want to get rid of him. I think now is the perfect time to get rid of him because you don't want to be paying somebody what he's being paid in the championship. And I think he's going to want to move as well, so I think everybody will be happy, and you can move on from Alfonso Areola. Moving on next is Kyle Walker-Peters, and I think he's a stay. I think not only should West Ham United keep him, but I think they're going to be able to keep him. Although he's had a pretty decent season and he's looked pretty good at times, 28 years old, I think there'll be some teams that kind of go in for him, maybe like a Leeds United, maybe Nottingham Forest, teams on the lower part of the table, but I think West Ham United might be able to keep him. They still have about 3 years left on his contract, and I think this would be somebody that would be great to have in the championship with you. Moving on next is to Kilman, and I think he's going to be a sell. He's honestly on one of the highest wages at the club. He's in his prime. He's 28. Although he hasn't looked amazing this season and he's lost his spot, I think he's not going to want to play in the championship. I think he's a bit higher of a level than the championship. I think, again, he could play for a team in the lower half of the table like a Leeds United. And I think he would work really well in the back three for Leeds United. He does have about 5 or 6 years left on his contract, which I think would be a little bit of the issue. But I think West Ham can recoup a pretty decent fee for him and move on for Max Kilman. He's honestly not played. I don't think Nunu is going to stay if they get relegated, but he's not in Nunu's plans if he does stay, so I think it's an obvious sell. Moving on next to Diouf. I think he's going to be sold because he's had a pretty good season. But I think there is a slight possibility he can stay solely because he's on a relatively low wage. He has 5 years left on his contract, 5 or 4 years. He was just purchased this year. I think West Ham can maybe have the leverage over him because of the contract, because of the low wage, and say, you're going to stay for 1 year and we're going to get back into the Premier League. We're going to instantly go up. So I think there's a decently high chance he can stay. Although I think, again, they're going to have to fight maybe even big clubs. I don't think big clubs are going to go for Kyle Walker-Peters, but for Diouf, I think even somebody like a Manchester United or a Newcastle United might be interested in someone like a Diouf. But I think there is a chance he can stay. Moving on next is Mavropanos. I think, unfortunately, he's going to be a sell, although I want him to stay. He's had a pretty good season this season. He's looked really, really good. He's in his prime, 28 years old. He only has 2 or 3 years left on his contract. Although he's not on an insane wage, and West Ham would love to keep him because he's looked so good this season and he's come up with some timely goals. I think they're going to be forced into selling him. I think a bigger team is going to swoop in and pay the fee. And I think, unfortunately, he's going to leave. Moving on next is Todibo. I think he's got 1 year. I think this is his final year on his contract. I think he's a contract exit. Unfortunately for West Ham, they're not going to be able to get any sort of fee for him. But even if he wasn't, I think he was going to be sold. I don't think he wants to play in the championship. I think he's a bit higher of a level than championship level, even though he hasn't looked amazing. He's still only 26. I think in the right place, he can look pretty good, and he could go back to the Todibo we remember. But at this moment in time, he's just a contract exit. Moving on next is Wan-Bissaka, and I think there's a chance he can stay. And I'm going to put him in at a stay, although he is relatively earning a pretty high wage. This is another player kind of in his prime. I think the issue is Kyle Walker-Peters is staying, and I don't know if you want to keep two of these types of players at the club at the championship level. But I think, again, we've seen Kyle Walker-Peters and Aaron Wan-Bissaka play left back while the other plays right back. I think if these are your two... If this is your right back and your left back in the championship, you're in a good spot. I think they should do everything they can to keep Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Even though he hasn't looked amazing this season, he is earning a decent wage, but he still has 5 or 6 years left on his contract. He's in his prime. I don't think there's going to be an insane amount of clubs kind of going for him. He's almost 30. I think he's going to maybe have a stay at West Ham and try to get them back up. Moving on next is Scarles. I think he's an obvious stay. Youthful. He's looked pretty good at West Ham when he's been given some game time. And I think he's going to be given a lot more game time because this is the type of player that you play when you're in the championship. This is, you get your youth talent. And when you lose a lot of your stars like Mavropanos and like Kilman, you go and you play your youth talent, and they hopefully are able to get you back into the Prem. So I think he's an obvious stay. Moving on next to Ezra Mayers, I think he's an obvious stay as well, just again because you're losing 3 of your top center backs. You're going to need players that are able to play that position. And although he's youthful and although he hasn't had a lot of game time in the first team, I think this season coming, if they're in the championship, he will be able to get that game time. Moving on next is Magasa, and I think he's an obvious stay as well. Nuno Espiritu Santo has shown some affinity for him. He's given him some pretty good game time and in some pretty meaningful games. I think he's looked relatively decent, nothing insane, but I think in the championship with consistent minutes, constantly playing, he'll be able to just kind of lean into that development, lean into that potential, and probably dominate in the championship, honestly. Moving on next to Souček, although I think he only has 1 year left on his contract and could be a contract exit, I think he is going to be a stay. I think this is someone that is going to stay for West Ham United. It is somebody that really has been at the club for so long, he bleeds for West Ham United. He dominates the midfield. He dominates in duels. He comes up with really timely goals, and this is somebody that in the championship can give you 10 goals, and that's something you want. And I think this is somebody that would be willing to stay. Even though he has been at the club for so long, he isn't on the most insane wages, I think about 90,000 euro per week, which is high for the championship. But again, for somebody like that, I think 1 more season. I think also with a contract renewal, you can get him for a little bit less when you're in the championship. So I think Thomas Souček is hopefully a stay for West Ham United. Moving on next to Freddie Potts, I think he's a stay. He's basically like an Oliver Scarles to me. This is the type of player you are hoping comes into his own when you get relegated and you go to the championship. He was getting game time in the Prem. He's looked decent. This is the type of player you want to hopefully dominate the midfield in the championship. And this is somebody that has a good amount of potential, and I think he might be able to do it. Moving on next to Somerville. If it was last season and you told me West Ham got relegated, I would say he was staying. He really didn't look amazing and he wasn't getting a lot of game time. But after this season, I think he's going to unfortunately be a sell. He's looked really, really good this season. He got injured for a short amount of time, but even when he came back recently against Arsenal, he looked really, really good. Really comfortable taking on his defenders, really direct, and now he's finally finishing. That was the problem, is he was so direct and always beating defenders but not finishing. Now he's finally finishing. This is somebody you're going to unfortunately not be able to keep. This is somebody that is going to be poached by a bigger club. Although you would love to keep him, it's just not going to be able to happen. Callum Wilson, I think, is going to maybe be a stay. I think this is somebody, again, who has 1 year left on his contract and could be a contract exit. But someone like this is maybe who you'd want to keep at your club. He's kind of got the experience at West Ham for this last year or two, and he's looked okay at times. I think this is someone that could thrive in the championship, either as your starting striker or someone that comes in and gives you a solid 30 minutes a game with just a lot of matureness about him. He's got a lot of experience. 33 years old. I don't think there's going to be a lot of Premier League clubs itching to sign Callum Wilson. So I think this is somebody that you could keep on a relatively low wage that can give you some decent output in the championship. Moving on next to Tati. I think Tati Castellanos is unfortunately going to be a sell, even though West Ham just bought him. And, he's looked decent at times. I think he's honestly been pretty good. I've been decently impressed with Tati. I think you're not going to be able to keep this level of talent at West Ham in the championship. Again, he's 27 years old. He's in his prime, and he has no affinity for the club. He's only been here for a couple months. He is probably going to get poached and either by a bigger club in the Prem or just go back to the Serie A where he just was. I don't think a player that was just playing at Lazio and now was in the Premier League is going to be dying to be playing in the Championship within a year. So I think this is going to be, unfortunately, a sell. Moving on next to Adama Traore, although, again, this is another one of these players that I think only has 1 year left on his contract and it could be a contract exit. I think this might be somebody, especially if Nuno Espirito Santo stays, that will be a stay. I think this is a player that Nuno Espirito Santo likes. Although he hasn't played too much this season, he relatively trusts him. And I think, honestly, as sad as it is to say, he's pretty championship quality. This is a player that I think could have a really good goal and assist output in the championship. Really just be able to be more athletic and more physical than most players in the championship. And just, honestly, with pace, just run right past them. And although his delivery is not the best, I think with the amount of chances he'll be able to get with just his sheer pace and athleticism, I think this is someone you'd want in the championship and can help you move right back up. Moving on to Pablo, I think he's going to be a stay. Typically with players like Pablo, like Castellanos, where you pay a decent fee for them, and in that same year you go down, they typically go and are instantly sold to a different club in the Prem or, again, at a higher level. But honestly, Pablo hasn't looked good. And I watch a lot of the Portuguese league. I don't really know why West Ham signed him, and I don't really understand why Nuno Espirito Santo wanted him so badly. Although he was having a relatively decent season at Gil Vicente. I mean, before that, as his time at Gil Vicente, he's been pretty average, and I don't really get it. And at this season, he hasn't really done much. But I think this is someone that, again, in the championship can hit the ground running or at least be somewhat serviceable. So I think this is somebody that's going to stay. Moving on to Jared Bowen, and unfortunately, as much as it hurts to say, he is going to be a sell. I just don't think someone like Jared Bowen is going to stay at the club when, unfortunately, he could play for a team like Newcastle or like Everton and come up with 15 goals and assists each season, and he's just very much Premier League quality. He can stay in the Premier League. He doesn't need to go down. I think if he does go down with West Ham and bring him instantly back up, he is such a legend for the club, cult hero, everything, and deserves the world because players like that are awesome and so invaluable to clubs. But I think, unfortunately, he's going to be sold to probably a team like Newcastle or Everton. And moving on to Nicholas Füllkrug, I think he's going to be a sell as well. He's on loan right now. He's not really in the plans for West Ham. When he played the one season for West Ham, he was injured and just really didn't look amazing. And I think he's going to be sold to the Serie A or back to the Bundesliga. So he's going to be gone as well. Moving on to James Ward-Prowse, I think he might honestly be a stay. This is a player who is on loan right now at Burnley, and he's looked decent for Burnley. He's been able to start for Burnley. He's kind of lost his footing in the Premier League. He's been bouncing around at clubs, Nottingham Forest, Burnley, West Ham. But I think in the Championship, if he's willing to stay there, and if no Premier League team wants him, which I don't know if there will be teams lining up for him, I think he can really be a pretty decent Championship player, pretty dominant, kind of like a Dewsbury Hall level player for Everton, but just in the Championship, where he's able to kind of get a little bit of freedom, come up on the ball, a little bit of space, get some goals and assists. Again, we all know about his set piece taking ability. So I think this would be a pretty good stay. I think this could revive his own career, and it could help West Ham. And this is pretty much the entire relevant West Ham squad right now. This is what I think they should do. This is what I think is going to end up happening. I think Hermanson takes over the goalkeeping role. I think you're going to be able to keep players like Kyle Walker-Peters and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Diouf, who knows, but I think that would be a good stay. Unfortunately, you're going to lose players like Dotti, like Jared Bowen, like Somerville, like Mavropanos, some of your best players this season. But this is what happens when you go down. So let me know what you guys think about West Ham and their squad if they go down. I think, honestly, not a lot of this changes even if they stay up. I think other than Jared Bowen maybe staying and Tati staying, I think Somerville still ends up being sold, Mavropanos, Kilman. I think a lot of this stays the same, other than, again, maybe an Adama is actually allowed to leave on a contract exit because you don't need him in the Premier League anymore. But this is what I think is going to happen, so let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you.